So a good buddy of mine named Liam Silkey recently created a three-part series where he basically went over what if DC sold the rights to their characters instead of Marvel. Now some other people have done this like Black Lion and Geek Informant. However, I wanted to do something different for my take. Basically, in this timeline, after the failure of Batman and Robin, DC decided to do damage control and sold the film rights to their various characters. Sony Pictures got Batman, Universal got limited access to Wonder Woman, and, for the topic of this video, 20th Century Fox got Superman, the Doom Patrol, Green Arrow, and Black Canary. With that out of the way, let's get into part 1. What if DC sold the rights to their characters? 20th Century Fox. Starting off in 2000, we have Superman, Man of Steel. This film would be very similar to Superman Returns and Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. The Superman Returns elements would be directed by Bryan Singer. It would star Brandon Routh and some of the other cast members from Superman Returns. However, there would also be elements of Man of Steel. For one, this would be an origin story, since this would only be like 10 or so years after Superman 4: The Quest for Peace came out, so I don't really think people were super ready to jump back into the continuity of the Christopher Reeve films, even if we are ignoring Superman 3 and 4. But anyway, and also General Zod would still be the main villain. Moving on to 2003, we get two films here. First, we get the sequel to Superman Man of Steel called Superman Man of Tomorrow. This film would have similar elements to that of the animated Man of Tomorrow film, as this film would bring in Lex Luthor as the main villain. Obviously not, played by Kevin Spacey. While Lex would be the main villain, he wouldn't be the major antagonistic force. That would go to Rudy Jones, who becomes Parasite. I take a page out of Just Some Geeky Guy's pitch for Superman Unchained in his pitch for his DCU, at least first phase, where basically, because of the fight between Superman and Zod, Rudy's family was killed, and now he wants to get revenge on Superman. So Lex Luthor turns him into Parasite, and they fight. However, ultimately, Rudy ends up actually teaming up with Superman and ultimately sacrificing his life to help Superman fight Metallo. The other DC film to be released by Fox this year would be Green Arrow, which would have a similar enough plot to Green Arrow Year One, which technically came out in 2007. However, this wouldn't be based on that book or anything. It would just take elements that would later be used in that story. It's a Green Arrow origin story with Count Vertigo as the main villain. Black Canary also has a major role, but he doesn't really do much, so we can set her up for her own solo film, much like what happened with Elektra. Moving on to 2005, we once again get two films. First, we have the first Doom Patrol movie. This is, of course, an origin of the Doom Patrol, with the main villain being Mr. Nobody. The other film that will be released in 2005 would be Black Canary, and what less said about this film, the better. Moving on to 2006, we get the final film of the original Superman trilogy, Superman Brainiac. The plot of this film would see Brainiac come to Earth after hearing stories about Superman, the last survivor of Krypton, which, much like in most continuities, he was responsible for the destruction of. He ends up creating a clone of Superman named Bizarro, and basically wants to use Bizarro to take down Superman so that he can capture him and place him in like an exhibit of the various relics of destroyed alien worlds he's obtained, because he, of course, wants to destroy Earth as well. Superman ends up in the city of Kandor, and ultimately, he and Bizarro actually work together to defeat Brainiac, who is ultimately destroyed, and Superman uses the remains of Brainiac's destroyed ship, as well as his various technologies, to create Bizarro a world he can protect. That, of course, being the Bizarro world. Moving on to 2007, we get the sequel to Doom Patrol. This film would see the introduction of the Brotherhood of Evil, which would be led by the Brain and Monsieur Mallah. Moving on to 2009, we would get Supergirl. This film is basically a Supergirl origin film showing how she winds up on Earth, and the main villain would be Silver Banshee. Jumping forward to 2011, we have Superman Warworld. This film would serve as somewhat of an adaptation of Superman the Warworld saga, with Mongul as the main antagonist. Moving on to 2013, we would get another Superman spin-off, this being Superboy. This film would see the origin of Superboy, more specifically the Con-El version from the 90s, who, rather than being created by Lex Luthor, would instead be created by Bruno Mannheim and Intergang, who would also be the main antagonist of the movie. There would also be a post-credit scene setting up the next Superman movie. Moving on to 2014, we would get probably the biggest Superman film out of all the ones 20th Century Fox made, that being Superman Doomsday. This film would serve as an adaptation of the death and rebirth of Superman, with Doomsday, who was found by Bruno Mannheim and Intergang, is released to attack Metropolis. He and Superman fight, Superman dies, and then Supergirl, Con-El Superboy, and being introduced in this film, John Henry Iron Steel, basically have to travel back in time to save Superman. Moving on to 2016, we once again get two films this year. First of which being Lobo. Now, as much as I love Lobo as a character, I'm not super familiar with him. So if you have any ideas as to what the plot of this movie would be and who the main villain would be, give me your ideas in the comments, because I really have no idea. The other film that I released in 2016 would be Superman Darkseid. As the name implies, this would see Darkseid come to Earth and Superman would have to fight him. We'd also get appearances by other new gods like Orion, Mr. Miracle, Big Barda, and Highfather. In 2017, we would get Superman Truth and Justice, which in timeline is the finale to Brandon Routh's Superman story. This would be a blend of elements of Kingdom Come and What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way. Basically, the plot of this film would focus on older Superman who lost both his wife Lois Lane and his son James in a fight between the new Parasite and the Elite, led by Manchester Black. During the fight, Parasite split one of the members, who is basically a walking atom bomb, open, causing the destruction of the Daily Planet. After that, Superman retired, but he now has to come out of retirement to prove to the world that old-fashioned heroes who fight for truth, justice, and the American way will never truly go out of style. Moving on to 2018, we get the sequel to Lobo, which, as you can probably tell based on the quote-unquote poster I made, would have Mr. Mxyzptlk, or however you say his name, as the main villain. Moving on to 2019, we get the actual final Superman movie by Fox, Superman Eradicator. This film, of course, has the Eradicator as the main villain. This film also introduces us to a young Jonathan Kent who was born in between the events of Superman Doomsday and Superman Darkseid. The final DC film produced under 20th Century Fox, after them being bought by Disney and all, would be New Gods. This film would focus on Orion, Mr. Miracle, Big Barda, and a couple other of the new gods that are introduced in this film, as they have to take on Steppenwolf, who becomes a new leader of Darkseid's empire following his death at the hands of Superman in Superman Darkseid.